So I forgot to mention at the beginning of recording this what I intended to do. I intend to make a character around a gun that I find fascinating. So I'm starting with the gun and making the character around it, taking the history and the nature of the gun to build the character, instead of making the character and then adding things from outside inspiration. I'm taking the inspiration first and making the character. So I have shot a gun once. As an estadounidense, I think it's mandatory, but I'm not super interested in current guns. The history of guns, though, and historical guns and their weirdness, I find fascinating. I can't say I know the lingo except from reading it from this book, though. So these are squeezers. You hold them like these ones. You hold like this with the barrel in between your fingers and you squeeze it. So these two, that's how they work. These ones are turret repeaters. That's what the round is, turret, as I understand it. This is the one that interests me today. It's the Chicago Protector, it's the US, as opposed to Le Protector Pistol, the French one. And it has 7 rounds, which isn't gonna matter. As we start this, I need to get the hand right before I do anything else, because those little guns are hand size, obviously. So if you know anything about Magic the Gathering, and you don't have to because I'll explain, this is essentially a bottom-up character creation. Bottom-up means I'm starting with the mechanics, here meaning very specifically a mechanical device, and top-down would mean I'm starting with the world, the character, that sort of thing. So I'm doing a bottom-up character design here, starting with the mechanics of what this character is going to be doing versus who the character is. So I knew the mechanics of what I wanted this character to be doing. I knew I wanted this character to be firing a gun, moving backwards and away from their attacker, who I wasn't sure I was going to draw. I figured probably not based on how much page space I had. And that I wanted them to be from 1883-ish, because that's when the gun was produced. And I wanted them to be estadounidense and set in a metropolitan area, presumably Chicago, even though the gun was sold other places. This is the opposite of what I did for my last batter up, where I knew who the character was and what they were doing, and built the body downward from that, based on what I knew the body needed. This, I'm building the body first, because I know what the body needs, but I don't know what the character needs yet. This is why I spent so much time working on this hand. This is where the character starts, it needs to be right. I'm also just picky, but I also wanted this hand to be showing the gun in a way that was clear that it was a gun, and if you know about guns and the history of guns, you might even be able to tell it was a protector. Not that that super matters, but it was important to me to get this hand right so I could get the rest of the character proper, which is why I'm fussing with it so much. I don't want to straight up copy it, but I am trying to use it as reference, certainly. I will stop using this hand as reference in a minute. I ended up doing my own hand without reference, but having had the reference for at least a little while made me more able to do my own hand properly. So once I get this hand done, which will be a minute, I know what my body plan is going to be. I know what I want the movement of the body to be already. That's in my head even as I'm doing the hand. So what I'm trying to figure out as I'm doing this hand and do the body is who this character is going to be. And like I was saying before, I had some ideas. I knew this character was going to be Victorian. This is not someone using an antique gun, this is someone using a gun of their time. I knew that I wanted to do Victorian fashion, therefore, and I prefer women's fashion to men's, historically and currently as a general rule. I find it more interesting. And it's pretty uncommon to see a Victorian woman depicted in a action pose, kind of an action pose, doing something violent as opposed to sedate, even if, as this character is doing, she's defending herself more than anything. These guns were called pocket protectors because you could keep them in your pocket, and that is essentially what she did. It would have been in her purse or pocket. I don't know that their dresses had pockets. Maybe. I hope they did. But she would have had this gun hidden on her person, and she is now firing it at someone who is chasing her. And I decided that as I was drawing the hand. It was not something I knew as I began this image. So putting this together was a bit interesting. this would have been a time when a richer lady would have worn, like, everyone was wearing corsets, but a richer lady or a more upper class lady who did not have to do any work at all might have worn a shaper corset versus just a support corset. I want her to be moving backwards, but just the form that the clothing exaggerated is going to be different than what I'm used to. So there's also that to get. Because I knew what the body was going to be doing, I thought I could start by putting the clothing on the body. But because of the way the clothing was, the style accentuated the chest, a broad chest, not the breasts, and a lower waistline than we accentuate now, meant that it was changing the shape of her body in a way I wasn't used to, and I had to do her full body out before I could put the clothing on it. The perspective of the foot and leg was a little difficult, not terribly, but it took me a minute. And also figuring out how her legs would be able to move in all her skirts without having those skirts overlaying it to start was a little difficult too. Without knowing what top she was going to have, I didn't know what kind of skirt would go with it, and I will fuss with the skirts and figuring out what the hell kind of skirt she's going to be in for a long time later. So that'll be fun. Brief aside here, just letting myself ramble. For anyone wondering about thigh gaps, and nobody is, they are not natural unless you are unhealthily thin. You can move your hips in such a manner that you can force it by pushing your butt up and your upper hips forward, and it splays your legs in a way that makes it happen, but it's deeply uncomfortable. Any real bunny ear thigh gap is coming because you're unhealthy. That has nothing to do with character creation, but it is a pet peeve of mine. So at this point in the drawing, I am doing the drawing, but I'm also looking up clothing that she might be in, looking up historical clothing and hairstyles. I'm doing that at this point now to try and figure out how her body would move underneath it. Like, I have to get her back and hips how they need to be for her going backwards, but her legs in particular are going to be affected by the skirts. And I mean, the corset is going to affect her upper back and waist, but it's going to do so less than you might think. Corsets were very bad for you, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them were a lot more flexible than people think. She might have been in a shaper. I don't think this character would be. I'll explain why later. But she might have been in a shaper, which would have been harder to move in. But if you've ever worn a corset, they are flexible. It takes some effort to move them, but especially if you were falling backwards, the gravity and the momentum of it would cause the corset to bend a little bit to help you, to allow for more movement. Unless you were in a steel-boned one. Those ones were filthy and awful. But yeah. I did not include the recording of me talking about the Belgian fisticuff. I wanted this character to be using it, but knew I might not be able to pull it off, and I didn't, so I didn't bother to put the recording in. The Belgian fisticuff is meant to be used as a gun, but it can also be hooked around the pinky and used as a knuckle duster. I knew as I started this character that I wanted them to be using that gun if I could pull it, which meant that this character was going to be a brawler, and thus would not be in any kind of corset that would hold them still, if they were going to be in a corset at all. I didn't know if it would be a man or a woman. So, for the record, Victorians wore lots of colors. The reason we think they were very gray and black and, like, morbid is mostly because pictures were black and white. They wore plenty of color. Shame. I'm going with these kind of scallop-looking shoes. You're only going to be able to see maybe a little bit of them, but that's... I looked them up, and I wish to share that I looked them up. So there. The shoes also matter because they're going to affect how her feet are moving and hitting the ground and pushing off the ground too. She probably would have had a hat, which is frustrating. So it means I have to draw a hat, not strictly on her head. I did her face first because I wanted to do her hair before her hat, because I didn't want to draw her hat. And I didn't want to draw her face around her hair. I thought that would be a pain in the mule. So I drew her face first. It also gave me, once I had decided that the fisticuff was not going to be part of the image, I had wondered if she would be frightened. But drawing the face was kind of a loose thing. I didn't have anything particular in mind, but drawing the face made me certain that this character was not afraid. She might be a little disconcerted, but not afraid. And for some reason I ended up thinking of Bonnie and Clyde. Like, there is no Clyde in this image, and I don't expect her to have one. I don't think she does. But I ended up thinking a bit of Bonnie and Clyde, so I think she's a bank robber. I always knew I was going to put this character in upper class clothing. I knew that from the bottom up decision, kind of like the gun. And I knew that I was going to do that because I find the upper class clothing more intricate, and I wanted to do something intricate and also more fantastical. Upper class clothing doesn't have to follow the rules of being able to move in stuff the way middle or lower class clothing does. They just don't have to work, so they don't have to make shame that you can do work in. So I wanted to build that. One of the things I forgot to do was take a picture of this character at the end of my sketch process, so you get a little sneak peek here, a fumble through, but I decided to put her in pleated skirts because pleats can actually get really expensive. They require a lot more fabric than non-pleats, and so they can be a signal of wealth. They also would allow her a big range of movement, and I liked the movement especially around her foot where it flares up that a pleated skirt allowed.